Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Stevens, coming to you from the InsideFoosTV studios here in Durango, Colorado, and welcome to an InsideFoosTV conversation. Today, we're going to be talking with Joe Heslinga, the writer and director of the movie Foosballers, which will drop this February 13th at iTunes. There'll also be screenings in 9 North American cities on February 11th. Go to foosballersmovie.com for more information. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the creative force behind the new movie Foosballers. Joining us from beautiful Southern California, writer and director Joe Heslinga. Welcome, Joe.
What's up, Jim? How are you?
Very good. Foosballers is scheduled to be released February 13th at iTunes and Vimeo, and then we're screenings in 9 cities across North America, and that's on February 11th, correct?
Yeah, so February 11th, Tuesday, we're going to be screening in a bunch of different cities around North America. We have Chicago, Minneapolis, Seattle, Denver, Dallas, San Francisco, Atlanta, Toronto, doing a screening in Crowley, Louisiana, where the Roof family lives. Yeah. That's all on our website, foosballersmovie.com/screenings. And on February 13th, you'll be able to purchase the movie on iTunes and Vimeo on demand. That's on Thursday, February 13th.
That's exciting news, certainly for those of us who are involved with the sport of table soccer, and hopefully there'll be a good crossover audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I knew nothing about foosball going into this. We kind of fell into it, just late night Googles, and we came across a bunch of your videos, and we didn't know pro foosball was a thing, and we went down this rabbit hole, and we wanted to make a movie that was about foosball, but more importantly about the people who play and, about the history and the culture and everything else. So we really tried to make a movie that was for everybody.
Joe, you've been a writer and producer working in Hollywood for several years, and now you're a director as well. Talk a little bit about how you got started in the business.
In the business? Well, I went to University of Arizona. They have a film school, but I wasn't in like the physical production. I did more of a producing and writing emphasis. So when I moved out to LA, I got my first job working in development. I worked for David Zucker, the guy that did Airplane, and then later worked for Vince Vaughn's production company, Wild West Productions, and worked in development for a little bit. And then I segued into writing and story producing for a couple of their shows.
Well, let's talk about the genesis of the movie, the idea of the movie. What made you really get interested in foosball? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about that, and you've also become a player now, I believe, and you were not at all before the movie.
I mean, player in the loosest form. I don't have a table. I don't really go out to practice because, as you know, big cities, bars don't really have the real estate for a foosball table. They look at every square inch and they're trying to pack in stools and tables, for eating and drinking. So there's not a lot of tables to play in LA, but there are some. But I've started to practice a little bit whenever I see a table. I'll go play. But I can't remember what your question was. How did I get into foosball? It was that late night Google. Me and Mike Wagstaff, our other writer and producer, we were talking about obscure sports, and they have cornhole on TV, they have cliff diving on TV. I mean, poker 10 years ago was considered or 15 years ago, whenever they started broadcasting it, people thought it was crazy. But they had poker on TV, and we started talking about all these obscure sports and figured, man, they have a world championship for everything. I bet you they have pro foosball. And sure enough, they did. Came across a bunch of your old videos, then discovered there was a book written by Kathy Brainerd and Johnny Lott called The World Table Soccer Almanac that had all this history. And I think what made us gravitate towards foosball was that it wasn't just a sport that was a world championship that was within the past 5 years. There's a crazy, amazing history with it, dating back to the 70s, and the fact that there's been a world championship every year since the early 70s was impressive to us. It showed that this isn't just a novelty game that could have its moment in the spotlight. This is a sport with a rich history, with something that has staying power, whether even though it's gone through its ups and downs. I mean, it's still around today. I don't know if cornhole is going to be around to the extent that foosball has had a history. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
And talk a little bit about the process of making a feature-length film, the time, the incredible amount of footage you need to shoot, and of course the traveling to the hometowns of all these great foosball players. And you were doing this with 2 newborn children and a full-time job as a writer.
Well, yes and no. So when we started, I didn't have any kids. I was actually on hiatus from Evis for Family, and with animation, I work in animation. Uh, there's a lot of downtime in between seasons. It takes a long time to produce the episode. So we were on hiatus when we first started tinkering with the idea, and it took us from initial concept to finished movie about 3 years, and we were filming and editing throughout. And then I was working, when I wasn't working on the show, I was working on other shows. So I was a lot of times editing in the middle of the night in my 1-bedroom apartment. And during the editing process, I had 2 kids, 2 years apart. But that was a challenge, just balancing life. It was similar to if you're a pro foosball player, you have to put in the time to be good. And I had to put in time in the edit bay and going through the massive amounts of footage. We had, like 20 terabytes worth of stuff. And I had never made a movie. I've written a bunch of stuff and produced things, but I had never directed a feature film, never edited a feature film. But, when you're dealing with a independent movie like ours, we raised money on Kickstarter, but didn't have really a budget for post-production, which documentaries are made in post-production. That's where the story is crafted. That's where everything is fine-tuned. So I did it myself. We had Mike, our other producer, did a bunch of the graphics and did a bunch of other stuff associated with post-production, but the actual editing of the movie I did in our apartment in the middle of the night. And, it took a while, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
Now, the other thing you had to do is you had to do research about what really is quite an incredible history of this sport, going back to the 1970s when we had the $1 Million Tour. Players were playing for a living. And in fact, the style of play that we still use today was created back in that golden era of table soccer. What really surprised you when you did the research into the sport and then the evolution of it? What was some of the things that really made you kind of sit back and go, wow, that was pretty amazing?
I think everything. The fact that pro foosball exists is still surprising. The fact that they had a world championship in the 70s surprised me. The fact that they had $1 million pro tour surprised me. And the fact that it had a devastating collapse was also a surprise. But then I guess when you think about coin-op industry and stuff, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, we were just blown away at the history of it, and we were more blown away that it's never really been covered in the media. We came across a couple articles here and there where you could tell they just kind of half-assed it. They would go to a tournament, talk to 3 people, write an article that their editors would accept, and then they moved on to the next thing. So they were all not great, but we knew that to tell the story, to tell a proper story, you need to spend time. You need to not just meet somebody one time for 20 minutes. You need to spend time with them, learn what it is that makes them tick. Why do they play foosball? What drives them to be a pro foosball player? And I think the passion, the relationships, all that stuff is important in storytelling, and it's important to take the time to really get underneath the story of why. Why do people do this? Why have they decided to forego a traditional, whatever traditional is? Why have they chosen the path less traveled? And that's kind of what the movie is.
And you do find that in the world of table soccer, the individuals who compete and play whatever level they play at are kind of interesting people. They're a little different. They're quirky. There are, of course, lawyers and doctors and everything at the other end as well. But there are a lot of interesting characters in the world of table soccer.
Absolutely. And I think I found myself feeling a connection with pro foosball players as a filmmaker because, unless you have a big studio behind you or you have a bunch of money, if you're making a movie, you're doing it independently. You're doing it on your own. You have to put in the time, and you don't know what's going to happen in 2, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. There's no guaranteed success, no matter how much work you put in. So as I'm, we're working on this movie for free and not sleeping and putting in a lot of sacrifice. It felt like we were foosball players. We're, pursuing this goal of making a movie. Who knows if anyone's going to see it? Who knows if it's going to be good? But we loved what we were doing. We felt passionate about it, and we really enjoyed the process. So, it made us happy.
Sure.
And I feel like if you're a pro foosball player, that's what you're doing. You're following your dream of playing foosball and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And one of those characters we talked about, a guy who certainly was following his dream, Todd Lafredo, who is certainly one of the stars of the movie. I found him very entertaining. This is a guy who first burst on the scene in 1977 on that $1 Million tour, winning the World Championships. And here we are in 2020, and Todd is still a factor. Talk a little bit about your adventures with Todd in the filming of this movie.
Well, Todd is a very cool dude, very interesting dude. Not just him, but it felt like everybody we were trying to film with, they're a bit nomadic by nature. When you go to tournament, you kind of live life on the road. So it was really hard to pin him down to say, hey, we're coming to film with you. Are you going to be here? And it was always like, well, I might be in Baltimore. I might be in California. I have a tournament here. Going to stay with a friend here. So just trying to lock that guy down was a bit of a challenge. But, when we did finally say, all right, we don't care, we're coming, you got to stay where you're at. When we filmed with him, it was a lot of fun, really entertaining. And for people who don't know anything about pro foosball or competitive foosball, you have no idea what it's like to see someone who's that good until you see it in person. You can watch videos and be kind of blown away at the ball control, but until you step on the other side of the table and you grab the rods and, on the other end is Todd Alfredo, it's nerve-wracking. I remember he was like trying to teach me stuff, and I was like shaky on the rods because when he hits the ball, like the whole table, you could feel it. You could feel it in your chest. You could feel it in your hands. And I just like grab the rods and was thinking, what am I doing? I'm so terrible. I thought I was good. And this guy not even doing anything is 1,000 times better than I could have ever been. So so Todd was a lot of fun to hang with and film with. It was just tough to lock him down as far as his travel.
Now, one of the neat things about the movie is that you do travel to the hometowns of these legendary players. You were in Crowley, Louisiana. You were in, of course, the Front Range of Colorado. And one of the places you also went was down to Alabama. And I think one of the real touching stories in this movie is Cindy Head, a fierce competitor on the table. But we really got to look at the softer side of Cindy.
Cindy was someone who we knew about because we went to a tournament in Las Vegas. It was our first tournament at the Hall of Fame. And I think we were interviewing somebody, and all of a sudden we just hear, way on the other side of the ballroom, someone screaming. We're like, what is going on over there? And it turns out it was Cindy Head, and we learned more about her. And all we knew was that she was just insanely passionate about foosball, which, if you're making a movie about people who play foosball, it's like, oh, that's a cool person. Let's go talk to her. And what I think surprised us was the level of humanity that Cindy has, as she is not just this caricature of an intense athlete who's passionate about foosball. She is such a layered, amazing person who has so many dimensions to her. And when we went to Alabama, we just saw a completely different side of her. She wasn't on the table screaming. She was, she used to be a police officer, and she took us down on downtown where she walked the beat, and she's walking around talking about, how she would see somebody on the corner They would come up, give her a hug, ask her how she's doing. She's waving. She's, it was like she was kissing babies, like she was the mayor. And as we're walking, she's like, oh, yeah, I arrested that guy for doing this and that. And, oh, I arrested that guy for doing this and that. But they all had a great respect for her, even though she was retired, even though, it had been a couple years since she had seen some of these people. They still remembered her. And she said, if you treat people with respect, they'll have respect for you. And it was just a completely different side to her as a person that I had seen on a foosball table. So that was like kind of blew us away. And then when we found out her story about, why she started playing foosball and what it means to her and why she continues to play and be so passionate about it, it was really touching. And you would never imagine, I think, to non-foosball players in a million years that a foosball player would have an emotional story that you would connect with on such a real level. They would think you're joking. It's like, no way. It sounds like a joke. But yeah, Cindy was a great person to talk to and to get to know and film with her down in Alabama.
A foosball table is an odd thing. It's like you gave somebody a guitar. Would they know what to do with it? Did they really realize the potential of that guitar if they've never seen anybody play it?
A lot of people know what foosball is, but nobody really knew that it was played professionally.
There is no publicity on foosball. That's not something they cover on sports.
Foosball players are all obsessive.
I didn't have many friends in high school. I was a foosball player. I wasn't a football player.
He's going to Worlds and he's going to expect to win every last thing he plays. He goes there expecting to win.
8 months ago, the season opened up in Kentucky, and here we are at the Tornado World Championship.
Yeah! Come on!
I want to be the one on that table where everybody's screaming, hooting, and hollering. I want to be the best player in the world.
When you're watching the people on the video play, you're generally watching good ball.
No mercy, no mercy.
I really loved foosball. When I say that, I mean it like a woman. I mean, I loved the game.
It was really popular in the 70s. That was $1 million tour back then.
Foosball was the 8th largest sport in America.
We were playing as a job 365 days a year.
Life was about foosball. It was truly like a religion.
We started meeting celebrities. That was a dream come true.
Evolution of foosball was going to become a permanent fixture in professional sports.
But it never got back to that kind of money.
If I could just make a living off of it, that'd be a dream.
They all had to get real jobs, even though some kept playing.
I'm trying to keep the vagabond lifestyle alive.
It's not as huge as it was, but I still like to know who wins.
A lot of my game is heart.
Come on, Cindy, come on!
Second is just, you're the last loser. Second sucks.
He's going to be the underdog for Worlds.
She hits that ball harder than her mama does.
I have a big target on my back.
That's his Moby Dick. That's what he's chasing.
Oh, that foosball's the devil.
Do you have any favorite stories from the filming of the movie? Was there maybe your funniest scene or one that was in the movie or even something that got left on the cutting room floor?
Oh, man. Tried our best to put all of our favorite bits in the movie. You can imagine a ton of stuff was left on the cutting room floor. One of the big stories that did was Tommy Atkinson. Originally, we were going to follow him leading into the World Championships, and like a lot of pro foosball players, there's things that often will get in the way of you going to the World Championship because people have real lives, they have families, they have jobs. So Tommy didn't compete at the World Championships that year, so we really had to focus on the players that did compete because you want to be emotionally invested in their journey. But Tommy has an amazing story, and we do have something cut that we'll probably put out at some point. But his journey from, his upbringing in Oklahoma to winning a world championship at such a young age, and then, going through the peaks and valleys of his own personal life, and then coming out on the other side of it, was an amazing story. It was like, this is a powerful story that would be on could be on ESPN or like an E60 or something. But it's about foosball, but it's not. It's about a person's journey. The sport they play just happens to be foosball.
We're talking with Joe Heslinga, the director and writer of the movie Foosballers, which will drop at iTunes on February 13th. There'll be screenings around North America February 11th as well. Now, if you're an international foosball fan, it won't be available yet, but at some point down the road, they also will be able to view this film.
Yeah, we're working right now with some international distributors, and we're hoping that it's going to be made available to everybody very soon. I'm very anxious for everyone to see it. So I know you've probably had a lot of patience up to this point, just a little bit more. I promise it'll be worth the wait.
Well, it certainly was worth the wait for me. I had a chance to see it out at the Hollywood premiere a few months ago. Loved the movie. Thought it was just a really good movie. Best foosball movie ever made, of course, but a really good movie. And I think it's a movie that should raise the profile of foosball among the general public and make them aware that something like this subculture of foosball exists. And it's also going to be great for foosball players to learn a little bit more about the history and about these great players, and for kids. And I know you've had some involvement with Foosball Clubs USA, John O'Brien, the after-school program that's taking place up in New York.
Yeah, what John O'Brien is doing for foosball is amazing. I think that now more than ever, and again, this is coming from a guy who I played foosball a little bit growing up, but not to this level. But you see kids today, all they do is watch their iPhone or play video games, and it's cool to see kids doing something that's, well, it's not playing outside, it's doing something that requires, hand-eye coordination, and it's a competitive thing, so it's great for kids. And what he's doing with the schools and the clubs is a fantastic way to kind of grow the sport. So.
Yeah, we'll be up at New York State, the New York State Junior Championships at InsideFoosTV on March 21st. That's a Saturday. Put it on your schedule, folks. We'll have a telethon fundraiser. Give more information on how you can get involved as well. But what's next for you? Now, you've made this movie. It took 3 years of your life. You're a much older man now than when you started. What's next? Do you have anything else in the world of foosball potentially planned?
In the world of foosball, I mean, I want people to see and want to share the story that we were so captivated by and engrossed in, and I want to share it now with the world and have them. It's the same thing that we did. The movie's kind of a manifestation of the rabbit hole that we went down, right? Like, it started off just as a curiosity, and it sort of evolved into something that someone can now digest in an hour and a half. So I want people to see the movie. And I think just, now I guess I'm not an outsider because I'm in the foosball cult, so to speak. But I think there's a lot of potential with foosball, hopefully getting on, I'd love to see it on Fox Sports or ESPN or one of the big broadcasters, I think. I think when people see the movie, they'll see what we saw, and that there's a real sport here that is far deeper and more meaningful than just like a cheesy bar game that people know, just from their personal lives. So I think there's some cool things ahead for foosball. I think I'd love to see the World Cup that they do, broadcast on TV. See our the American foosball players, play on the international stage with the international players. I think there's a lot of cool things.
Well, Joe Heslinga, from someone who's been involved with the sport as long as I have, we appreciate everything you've done, the treatment you gave to our sport, and the way you have sort of showcased what it is that makes foosball so very special. Outstanding film. Great job. Again, let's talk about those 9 cities. That'll be February 11th in those 9 cities across North America that you can go and see it on the big screen, which really there's nothing quite like seeing it on that large screen. But those 9 cities again, of course, they can go to foosballersmovie.com to see those listed. But February 11th, this movie will go national.
Yep. The cities, again, are Chicago, Minneapolis, Seattle, Denver, Dallas, San Francisco, Atlanta, Crowley, Louisiana, and Toronto. And not only will you be able to see the movie on the big screen, which is going to be a fun experience, each one of those will have some special guests. I'll be at the screening in Chicago with Tony. A lot of the Denver cast, Tava Fredo, Robert Morris, Cindy Head will be at the Denver screening. So check our website. We'll have a full list of who's going to be where, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, and then iTunes on February 13th in the United States and Canada, and internationally come soon.
Coming soon to internationally. But again, Joe Heslinga, thanks for joining us here at Inside Foos TV. We're looking forward to the release of what we think is one of the major events, certainly in recent foosball history, and that's the release of the movie Foosballers. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
That's Joe Heslinga, the writer and director of the movie Foosballers, which will be dropping next week, February 13th, at iTunes. And, of course, you can watch it on the big screen February 11th in cities around North America. All right, let's have a look at our upcoming events at Inside Foos TV. February 28th through March 1st, we'll be up in the Pacific Northwest for Moneyball 9 there in Portland, Oregon. March 21st, and this is a good one, the New York State Junior Championships, a day-long event that will be a telethon to raise money, to raise awareness of this great program up in New York State that we hope to spread throughout North America and around the world. And then, of course, a really big one coming up April 1st through 5th in Las Vegas. It's the IFP Hall of Fame Classic, always a great one there in the city that never sleeps. And if you'd like to become an Inside Foos contributor, sponsor, or advertiser, please email InsideFoos1@gmail.com. Speaking of sponsors, I'd like to thank Rodlock, the best practice tool. Protectoflex Rod Guards, foosball safety system. And head over to ifptour.com for information on the U.S. Foosball Tour. RFDAS Security Systems, and now Hiring Heroes. I'm Jim Stevens. We'll see you foosing.